Okay, welcome back to another installment of RamDragon Studio. This is your host, RamDragon. There we go. I had a mishap with my camera, fell off the stand overnight. So, I had to put it back on, figure out what was loose. But now we're back on. I did some rearranging of the camera angle so that we can get a more square image of the page. And, well, as you can imagine, now I've got a shadow. So I'll have to figure that out later. For anybody who's trying to catch me on my regular live cast, I do apologize for coming an hour early. One of the reasons for the hour difference is I do have something later on this morning that is not optional to attend. What happened? Did I move my camera? So yeah, I have that appointment I need to go to later on. It's every Wednesday, and I should have remembered. But it is what it is, and we get what we get. So, first of all, today's topic is swing. The prompt for October 9th, Inktober, pardon me, there we go, is swing. That's interesting. So swing. I think I would like to keep with my my D&D theme. Yeah, I think how am I going to compose this? I have no idea. I think putting a nice, let's make this smaller. I'm sure we've all been in the situation where we're being attacked by a monster with a giant club, and clubs get swing. Well, they get swung. Swinged? Swung. Swang. One of those words. And if you know how to cheat your dice, let's put this shoulder up, this shoulder down. That'd be the back of the dude here. Sword. There we go. And this requires some bracing, so we're going to have one foot go way, way back here. And while we're way off balance, we need another foot to stabilize. My hero's a lefty. That probably means he's either dual wielding or has a shield. Let's since his shoulder's coming way back, let's make this a defending arm. And we're swinging against... I probably still got up too high. I should make him even smaller. And this is why I can never just start with ink. I have a horrible, horrible eye for composition. And that's one of the reasons why I'm doing these exercises. So if we bring him down here even lower, there we go. Let's make him like a cavalier. We'll give him a nice big shield. And then be crossing with a... Ooh, let's make him fight a troll. Oh yeah. So we've got a nice hunk of tree trunk here. Ooh, that's a hefty tree trunk. That's about the same diameter as the hero's waist. Let's that's a gnarly hunk of wood. Ooh, blocking it right on that knot. I like that. It's like the guy rolled a nat 20. There we go. We want to put some weight down on this. So how is our troll going to be standing? Let's put shoulder here. Nice squared off shoulders, and he's kind of coming down with it. So his head's down here too, and he's got his big old pimply body here, and trolls are nasty, nasty, nasty things. So he's coming around. We'll have one leg coming out towards us, and then going off to the side, and then the other one like that. There we go. And then really low. With his mouth hanging way wide open. And a nice sloping head with a point in the back. There we go. All right, I think we've got a good base to go off of. Let's refine it just a touch more before we go into inks. And I'm not going to refine too much of this. I think I'm going to keep it pretty much loose for the pencil part, so I can do most of the heavy lifting in ink. Skinnier legs. And I think we're going to give, since I already said Cavalier, let's give this guy some actual armor. And this guard kind of comes out towards us. He's going to have a long sword. Ooh, a nice tapering longsword. I have a hard time drawing swords. I enjoy swords tremendously and know a lot of the history and details of them, but actually imagining a new sword is always difficult. Let's get some armor. In the back, we don't tend to have full closings, and the reason is, even with full plate, unless you're a knight, or actually nobility, even knights most of the time, would doff their own armor. Don? We'll say don. They would don their own armor, so they have to have a way to get in and out. And even then, straps in the back is something somebody else has to seal for them. So some knights were able to have squires that would do that for them, but more often it was just a simple matter of expedience to have armor one could get in and out of on their own. And as a result, there wasn't a lot of armor in the back. And the other reason for that is, honestly, if you're in a war and the other guy gets behind you, you kind of deserve that. You're not doing your job. You're pretty easy pickings anyway. Now, despite that, padded armor of some kind, and frequently mail, would go underneath that. So you would have some protection regardless. I just find it hilarious that video game armor tends to go way, way over the top with what's armored and what's not armored. Because most of the time it's just not feasible. And that's actually going to be behind a shield, so let's get that shield in there. And knock those lines back so I don't forget we're doing a shield. And a tabard is another piece of medieval fantasy armor that is more of a, well, I suppose it's as much of a modern misunderstanding as it is a modern invention. There we go. And we can make allowances for some fantasy. I mean, this is guys fighting a troll, for crying out loud. But I hesitate to go too far with the fantasy just because, God, the medieval era was so fantastic to begin with. It doesn't need a lot of help. Skinny that leg out just a touch and bring that armor into contact. Flare it out. Give ourselves a boot. All right, we'll start with that and make sure I'm in the camera. Ooh, we're only less than 20 minutes in and already getting to ink. We're doing pretty well today. Been watching a lot of character creation, character design videos, trying to garner any tips and tricks I can. This isn't good. Where's my duty? There it is. All right, good old 0.5. And one of the things that one of the videos mentioned that I watched yesterday was when doing your character designs, start with the background. And that's always been a weakness of mine. Because backgrounds are just so, I don't want to say boring, because they're not. They're not boring. They're tedious. And they're so easy to get wrong. And one of the reasons I say wrong, I know we're talking about when in character design, you're talking about an imaginary situation, an imaginary scenario, an imaginary city with imaginary people. So, who can say what's right and what's wrong? Well, you draw a fantasy car, and unless it looks like something that your viewer recognizes as a car, it's not going to be a very good fantasy car. And that's kind of the situation I find myself in a lot, is I don't feel like my fantasy buildings, especially cityscapes, I'm terrible at them. I don't do them enough. Um, bear enough resemblance to their real counterparts. Ooh, that's actually kind of nice sword. I wouldn't mind having one. Um, that they don't, to me, they don't come across feeling like a a real thing, something recognizable. And so I often feel like I've failed when I do that. That obviously my city can't stand up to scrutiny because I don't believe it as the artist, and that's kind of a personal shortcoming as an artist that I have. Is I tend to be too hard on my own work, and prejudge it before I'm even finished with it. But that's something that you get over with time. You learn that it's part of the creation process. You figure out eventually that I'm going to change up this armor touch as I go along. That part of the creative process is, in fact, doing things wrong. And when you don't give yourself the leeway to do it wrong, then you're not really giving yourself enough room to figure out how to do it right either. Pardon me. So the shield's wrong, and I didn't sketch in a belt. The shield's wrong because it goes in front of this tabard here in the back. There we go. And this thigh armor is going to go up a lot higher than I have it sketched in. There we go. And medieval armor also makes generous use of leather. Leather being a material that we think of as a fashion statement, but honestly, it moves well and it provides a good deal of protection to its wearer. And even modern leather, anybody who's worn real leather and kept it, maintained it really well. Well, unless you have like sheep leather or something intended to be soft and supple. You probably know how the leather can keep you from getting scratched. It can stand up to all sorts of things, even a coat. I have a long leather coat, and the thing is over 20 years old, and it does a fantastic job. Even still, um, it stands up pretty well. I'm just indicating little shadows of rings here. This is a tedious job. I think back in the 90s, somebody decided that Captain America was wearing chainmail, and then it sort of got misunderstood, misconstrued. It wasn't drawn very well, and turned into weird bird scales or something. I don't know what's going on with that guy anymore. And I'm just making these shadows more numerous in the darker areas because it makes it look like thicker rings. There we go. I kind of wonder if I do a whole drawing without talking at all, if that would do better, because I can rant for a while, in case you haven't noticed, and just go on different topics. But ultimately, what it comes down to is, what do they say? Opinions are like buttholes. Nobody cares about yours. Everybody has one. Nobody wants to know about yours. Something like that. That's actually a pretty good, quickly sketched tonight. I'm not prone to toot my own horn, but that will definitely do. For a start. And you'll notice today I did a lot of the refining in the ink step rather than drawing most of the detail out in pencil. And I'll do the same thing with the troll. I completely failed to sketch an entire leg on the troll. I don't know where it's going to go. It would have to go it would be hidden behind what's his bucket anyway. So we'll give him a foot here. Here's a set of toes. That'll at least anchor him to the ground. I'm going to start with this hand here on this knuckle. I should give this guy some bony protrusions up here too. Let's not some pretty ones. Let's just give him some cranky looking gnarl spikes or something, just coming off of his back at weird angles. Trolls are a creature that you can kind of do what you want with them. As a DM, I have personally managed to accidentally TPK with a misplaced troll. And I'm not going to do the disgusting tongue thing that trolls tend to do. Oh, we had a party that I was playing. I wasn't a DM. Got totally wasted by a forest troll. And in Dungeons and Dragons, in AD&D anyway, trolls didn't really have any subclasses. Subclasses were kind of introduced, I should say, in 3.5. It's not to say that they didn't exist prior to that. 3.5 used a lot of very common house rules that different DMs would come up with, and very communicative community with TSR. And so a lot of those things ended up getting published as supplementary materials for a while. And then Wizards came along, and Wizards of the Coast, if you're not aware, TSR is the company that owned Dungeons and Dragons before it was sold off to TSR. Or, I'm sorry, to Wizards of the Coast. And Wizards really took a lot of the fan input to heart when they designed 3.5, and there was a lot of inclusions of material that people didn't expect to see, as well as keeping true to Forgotten Realms, which a huge portion of the community was really concerned about. Because Forgotten Realms was kind of the quintessential Dungeons and Dragons realm. Everything that happened in everything that was canon Dungeons and Dragons happened in Forgotten Realms. But regardless, there was still a huge amount of campaigns and materials that were written by fans, by brilliant authors, by people who were playing the campaigns that got published, that really helped to feed the mythos of Dungeons and Dragons. And a lot of that, like I said, was included in 3.5. And one of those things was this idea of a forest troll. And God, those things were the absolute worst. I mean, great as a monster creature. I mean, you don't get much more monster than a forest troll. Before then, they were in mountains primarily, cave dwellers and such, and they had, your typical Tolkien weaknesses of fire and sun. Well, these forest trolls, they not only had the regeneration of the cave trolls and the mountain trolls, but they had this, they had highly acidic blood. They had, I mean, their regen was just absolutely insane. And then, on top of everything else, they had this poisonous spit. And please, feel free, if you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to add corrections to the comments below. A lot of this is, 20 and 30-year-old memory that I'm going off of here. So I wouldn't be surprised if I'm getting some of these details wrong, but please add your corrections if you feel they're necessary. There we go. But man, yeah, like I said, I've personally been party to and the cause of TPKs with the misplaced troll. You get too excited, you think your party can handle it, and then your party turns out to be stupid that day. I mean, it doesn't take much. You misjudge a strike, and all of a sudden you end up wasting a very powerful magic spell on cutting a limb off a troll without finishing him off that round. Next round, the bugger's back to full health with all his missing limbs back in place. and, and you don't have that spell anymore. Let's see, how are we going to shadow this? We got a loincloth here. That's going to feed into shadow here. And we've got a shadow here. I'm kind of putting my light source back here behind the troll. I want the troll to be mostly in shadow. And how are we looking? How are we doing on time? We're still under an hour. I'm getting a little bit faster finally. I did a illustration for a client last night, trying to demonstrate different archery techniques, and what I turned in was basically Hawkeye's arm pulling pulling a string back, and the client said nothing. I let him go a minute before I pointed it out, and he was okay with it. So turned out all good in the end. But just got a wild hair up my nose about archery for a moment, and had to pursue a little personal joke. Here we go. And then this is cloth, so we're going to be more curved. There we go. And let's see. coming up on 10 o'clock right now. I can continue for a little while longer before I will simply have to pull the plug and say enough. Because I do have that appointment I need to attend. It's a regular job counseling that I go to, and really it's not of high value or honestly high priority, but the opportunities for networking are really good. And if I can get this YouTube stuff going, I can completely replace the networking opportunities with just doing this. I am liking the schedule of doing this every single day, making sure that I get it done every day. I've mentioned before that I have ADHD, and one of the things that I struggle with is anyone who has ADHD understands remembering words that you're saying in the middle of a sentence. Procrastination. I have a huge problem with procrastination sometimes. If I don't have a deadline that is due right now, then I am apt to put it off and put it off and put it off. And as a result, there's things that fall through the cracks that I would rather not fall through the cracks, but they do. However, when I give myself a deadline of right now, I do much better. So a daily deadline of videos has actually been proving very beneficial for me to get the art in every day. I know on October 1st I mentioned one of the struggles I've had was with my hand. I've had tech jobs for years, and when you're using a mouse like that, you're doing very little movements, but over and over and over again, and the tendency is to carpal tunnel. I've got a dent in my finger. Must be dehydrated this morning. But when I started feeling that pain, I immediately went to carpal tunnel. It had to be carpal tunnel. I mean, that was the only rational explanation. I was doing that tech job every single day, and it had to be carpal tunnel. So I struggled with it. I kept my hand in braces and did all the things that you're supposed to do for carpal tunnel. And when I had my hand in a brace, it helped. It helped a lot. And then over the years, it helped less and less. And finally, I was at a point where I could not draw. And so I kind of stopped drawing for a few years. And took it to the doctor. Artists, I'm sure you can empathize. I was getting a little depressed. I was getting a lot depressed about not being able to draw or create or anything. And the tech job was just not a creative position, and it was not helping me out at all as far as my depression goes. And I don't talk about my depression a lot because I deal with depression in a different way than most people do. And that way is recognizing it. I recognize it, and then I can deal with it, and then I can put it away. So I don't really express depression in a lot of the same ways that other people do. But this was getting to a point where I couldn't deal with it. It was interfering with regular thought processes. It was invading on a regular basis. So I basically I had to go to the doctor and say, look, something's wrong with my hand. I need help fixing it. And the doctor, on the phone with me, said, it's probably arthritis, but come in and we'll take some x-rays. I said, okay, that's fine. So I went in, and the doctor told me in the room, in the exam room, well, it's not carpal tunnel. He grabbed my hand and he did a quick carpal tunnel test. And basically the test was the way that he grabbed my hand would have made me scream bloody horror if I had carpal tunnel, which is a really stupid test if you ask me. But it didn't hurt, so no carpal tunnel. All right, fine. That's good news at least. He goes, the bad news is that leaves rheumatoid arthritis, and it's degenerative. I'm going, oh, well, darn, it's hereditary. If you got it, there's nothing you can really do about it, except to manage the pain. So he gave me a pain management regimen, and it didn't work. It was junk. And I kept up with it for years because I honestly had no other recourse. And then, earlier this year, I started a new job, and my hip was acting up in such a way that I could not stand for long periods of time. And it got to the point where I felt I was going to lose my job if I didn't get a handle on that problem. And so I went to a chiropractor, and the chiropractor goes, oh, there's nothing wrong with your hip at all. You've got this muscle that is tensed up. Well, that would have been great to know like 3 years ago when I went to Comic Palooza and spent the entire day hobbling between 2 or 3 panels because I couldn't walk. I mean, I got there and my hip locked up. It was a real waste of a weekend. I was really upset about that. So he stretched out the hip, made me cry like a baby, made fun of me because that's what you do, and sent me on my way. And I had to go back a few times before the treatment stuck. I mean, it was rehab. It was a rehabilitation treatment, and he got me back up and walking again. And you know, that was back in February, and I'm still doing fine. My hips are fine. But the doctor, my doctor, when he looked at my hand, I also had him look at my hip, and he told me my hip was arthritic, and it was only ever going to get worse, and all I could do was manage the pain. So now I'm going, wait a minute, the doctor was wrong about my hip. Was the doctor wrong about my hand? So I asked the chiropractor, and he looked at my hand. He goes, there's nothing wrong with your hand at all. The problem's up here in your forearm. And he reached up on my forearm, and I swear he barely touched it, and I fell apart. It was horrible. It was incredibly painful. So we started doing some rehab on my forearm, and it took a few months. It took a few weeks before I could use my hand normally. But it took a few months before I could actually hold a pencil again. And by that time, I hadn't been drawing for a few years. And it was kind of a painful time of my life. Not physically painful, but not being able to draw regularly was really dragging on my sanity. So yeah, I got that done back in February, and it's been working great ever since. But I got out of the habit of drawing. I was completely out of the habit of drawing. So yeah, that's kind of where I am now. I'm trying to get back into the habit, get drawing again, um, get back into doing the freelance. I have done some freelance jobs the last few weeks, but again, because I'm out of the habit, I kind of tend to get these freelance jobs and then forget that I'm doing them because I've developed the habit of procrastination again and dropping back into my old ways. So yeah, doing this every day has been much better for me than doing it like once a week or once a month. I still plan to do some animations. I would really like to do those. I've been struggling with a writer's block on what kind of an animation to do. I'll probably just end up doing a storyline or a draw my life kind of thing. I don't have a lot of interesting things to put in something like that, but anything's better than nothing. That, and I haven't animated in so long, I've kind of forgotten more than I should have. And yeah, that's kind of another secondary frustration. So I'm relearning a lot of my old animation tricks. Uh, Anybody who does animation, by the way, Adobe has put Flash back up as a free download. Now, the action script in Flash is still a huge uh, security risk, which is one of the reasons why browsers stopped being compatible with Flash in the first place. But if you're just doing an animation and you can't afford Animate, Flash is great. Animate is based on Flash. So a lot of the stuff that is learned in Flash can be applied directly into Animate. So it's a great place to learn um, how to use Animate for free. I think the drawing tools themselves are much better in Animate than they are in Flash. Flash does have a kind of clunky drawing uh, mechanic, whereas Animate is a little more um, like a cross between Vector, Flash, and Illustrator, and even Photoshop. But in Flash, you can import Photoshop and Illustrator elements. So, like I said, if you want to learn Animate, Flash is still a great resource, and it's free right now from Adobe. Highly recommend it if you want to learn it, but have a budget and not a very big one. There we go. Let's do a little bit of cleanup. And again, with no background, but that's what it is. We've got the end of the mighty swing, having been intercepted by the Cavalier. Cavalier was probably protecting the cleric again. Stupid cleric always getting in the way. Cavalier's got to risk his life. there we go. Thank you for joining me. October 9th, Inktober. Topic is swing. I'll see you tomorrow.